Welcome to this special encore presentation, where we'll dive into the secrets of effective digital storage with renowned architectural photographer, Jeffrey Totaro.
This is TWiP. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. This episode is about something that affects pretty much everybody that does any kind of digital stuff online, including photographers. And I would argue creative professionals are most affected by the decisions they make when it comes to storage. So my friend, Jeffrey Totaro, who's an architectural photographer, has walked over the hot coals for us and architected, no pun intended, he has architected a really solid and robust system for dealing with the images that he's working on and clients and all that good stuff. So, Okay, interesting. I'm hearing my power supply flick on and off.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Your UPS?
My UPS, yes, yeah, it's over here.
That's all right.
Okay,
as long as that's
right. Yeah, let me continue this. Here we go. So let me just finish that up. Okay. So we get to be the beneficiaries of Jeffrey basically walking over hot coals and figuring all this stuff out for us. So what I did, Jeffrey and I had a conversation, and what he did was he put together a kind of a training tutorial presentation that kind of covers what he did and what his setup looks like, and he's going to share it with you today. So first of all, Jeffrey Totaro, welcome back to This Week in Photo. It's good to have you back again.
Thanks very much, Frederick. Always good to see you. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely.
And, I just have some information I thought would be helpful to share. I went through this process of having to renovate my storage and backup solution just about a year ago, and so my system's been up for about a year, and it's been really good. So I thought I'd share it today.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see it. You and I were talking offline a little bit before we started recording. Part of your presentation covers Drobo, right, from Data Robotics, the storage robot, as they used to call it. I used to work there many, many moons ago for a short time. So I had a special affinity in my heart for Drobos, and I have two here. And, this was not planned, but one of my Drobos died just recently. And it was I had two Drobos. One was main and one was backup. And I had Carbon Copy Cloner doing doing its thing every night. Now I'm running on one nacelle here. So
Right.
This presentation is very appropriate for me and very timely. In fact, based on your recommendation, I'll likely, get whatever you tell me to get, and replace my Drobo setup with a real setup. So this is going to be good.
Yeah.
I'm excited. You've been teasing, I think, throughout the year, sending pictures of different things that you've implemented. I've seen glimpses of the brilliance. I haven't seen the brilliance in its entirety yet. So I'm looking forward to it. Right. So 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 I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you roll with it and teach us what you've discovered about storage.
No problem. That sounds good, Frederick. Yeah, I have a short presentation. I think we can certainly talk about the nuts and bolts of all the different hardware and things that we'll get into. But today I thought it'd be helpful, especially to talk about just overall strategy and certainly some of the products I've been using and just different ways to set it up. So what I have is a somewhat complex system, but it can be scaled way, way down to someone who's either just starting out or maybe just wants to dip a toe in and see how it goes. But I've been dipping my toes in storage solutions for 20 years, pretty much. So I've been through a lot of different parts and pieces. So what I wanted to start with was, and in fact, if you can see clearly enough on the slide, there's the top DVD there says Italy 2003. So that just happened to be at the top of the stack, but it was actually probably the first real digital camera experience. And that wasn't even camera, it was all scans. That's what was really a transition. So it was a personal trip to Italy back in 2003, where I shot film with a Nikon, I think F100 that I owned for about 2 months before I said, I'm done with this, and moved over to digital, at least for personal things. So it's kind of interesting that particular DVD happens to be on top of the stack. So back in 2003, I was kind of in a hybrid mode with film shooting film, scanning film. So I started to have a lot of digital files to deal with. So yeah, back then it was burn DVDs, maybe burn 2 DVDs, maybe keep one set off site. It was a lot of hassle, and none of it was automated in terms of being able to back things up. So those of you who are younger can have avoided that, and that's certainly a good thing. So as I got more and more into digital photography and transitioned to professional work, probably I think about 2004, when I switched from 4x5 film and scanning, because I shoot architecture and interior, so 4x5 film was the tool we used, and then scanning that film as a deliverable to the client, and to be able to make some adjustments. We didn't do a lot of Photoshop work back then, other than color. But then quickly, the storage became a question. How are we going to store all these different photos? And what's the best way to back them up? Anyone who's thought about digital storage knows that it's best to have 3 copies. Doesn't exist unless there's 3 copies of it, and preferably on 2 different media. I break a little bit of that rule, as you'll see in a minute, but I do have. So back then, this is like literally just a shelf in my basement of sort of expired hard drives, and these have been either in Drobo, like you mentioned, which we'll talk about a little bit more, or my first digital storage solution was something from Otherworld Computing, OWC. Back when I had an older Mac Pro, I got a SATA card. So it was a card you stuck in the computer, which allowed you to connect SATA drives, which are SATA is the connection protocol that most spinning hard drives attach to computers with. And so, but they had an external enclosure. So I had an external enclosure that held like 4 or 5 of the regular spinning hard drive. But then they were 125 gigabytes maybe at that time, or less. And so you had to have multiple ones of those. And if you wanted copies of it, you need maybe a whole second tower of those to copy things back and forth. And trying to find older files was like, well, wait a minute, what's on what drive? And nothing was really, the drive itself is searchable, but you don't know what's on one of the drives that's not in the tower. So it was just a big nightmare, and it was a lot of learning. This represents only some of the hard drives I happen to have in my basement. So there was a lot of back and forth of how I was thinking about what the best solution was. This, for a time, was my off-site solution. So these are literally a Pelican case full of hard drives. It probably weighs like 75 pounds. And so I would take this box over to, I work with an organization called Wonderful Machine. They used to be located not too far down the street from me. And they just allowed me to have a shelf in their closet to store my off-site solution for files. So I would go there and I would switch these drives out every I don't know, 3-6 months or whatever I felt doing. So again, a very manual process, really, really not very reliable, definitely down to a lot of human error. And it's a ton of different hard drives, and it was just a pain in the neck. You never really wanted to say, oh, let me go over there and get those hard drives and swap them out. No. It's definitely like it's worse than any other life task you can imagine. So for a while, I switched over, and actually it was Frederick, I think, and because he used to work with Drobo and some other earlier podcasts in Frederick's career, and maybe guest on This Week in or MacBreak Weekly, perhaps, where he may have mentioned this kind of thing. So Drobo was a really cool idea. So it was, they called it a storage robot. And this was, in terms of my use of it, an early form of RAID, which is a redundant array of independent disks, which was a way to put a bunch of hard drives together in one enclosure and have them share all the storage across all the hard drives. And the big benefit was that you could lose a hard drive. It could completely fail, and you wouldn't lose any data because it's doing something called RAID 5, which, so if you had 4 10 terabyte drives, one of those drives could fail, and then you wouldn't lose any of the remaining data you had on. You lose one drive's worth of storage capacity, to what they call parity, to allow that to work. But I remember at the Photo Expo in New York years ago, when Drobo would have a booth there, their big party trick was to have a 4K, maybe it wasn't even 4K at that time, but a live video on a TV screen, and they would just pop a drive out of Drobo, and it would keep playing. because that's how the system works. So
yeah, Jeffrey, and they even had dual disk redundancy. They had a little checkbox in the preferences where you could check and have up to two. I mean, you would lose space, storage space, but you could have up to 2 drives fail, which was what sold me on it, right? And yeah.
No, I mean, they were terrific in that regard. So the one I have pictured here is one of their 5-bay models, and another shelf in my basement is another 5-bay model. And the cardboard box above is one of their 8-bay models. And there's actually another one of those in my basement somewhere. But they worked great. But they were a category of storage called direct attached storage, or DAS. And we're going to talk about something coming up called network attached storage, which I don't know if Drobo ever got into. They may have gotten into it a little bit, but they were mostly in the direct attached.
Yeah, the 5N, the N series of Drobos were network attached.
Okay, God, I figured they did. But I always stuck to just direct attached ones. So basically, it's just a giant hard drive that you can attach to your computer, and it's only attached. You can only use it for the computer that it's attached to, or potentially access it through your local network. And you definitely had that sort of safety of a potential drive failure, and you wouldn't lose anything. So that was very appealing. And they work well for a while. Like the 8-bay one in the cardboard box, that's actually a replacement one, because the power supply died in the one I had, and it was out of warranty and it was out of production or something even. So I couldn't even get replacement parts from Drobo for it. That was kind of my first inkling that I'm not sure about this company, because they wouldn't even help me out to replace it. So I just bought another unit off of eBay, used one, and I was able to just take the drives and pop them into the new one, and it worked, thankfully, because it was just, my system was down. I didn't have access to that one. So the way I was running it was the small 5-bay was sort of my second step in the digital workflow, where I would have a similar kind of RAID setup, but a SSD RAID in the computer, and that would copy every day through something called ChronoSync. And I'll provide a bunch of links to some things I'll talk about here. So ChronoSync is a nice app that allows you to easily sync between. You can do one-way sync or two-way sync. And so I was doing mostly one-way sync, because everything that was done on the computer was then just pushed over to the Drobo, and it would just stay there. I guess it would. No, maybe I did do two-way sync on this. Yeah, I think I did. But regardless, so that was synchronizing just on a schedule, right? So I think I did it once a day or something like that. That it would overnight or something. It would look to the SSD RAID inside the computer, and then it would just synchronize over to the smaller Drobo, and then at a different time of the night, the smaller Drobo would sync to the bigger Drobo. And that worked well. Everything I knew I had extra copies of everything. So any given digital job, while the job was still active, I would have it on the laptop, I would have it on the computer on the SSD, and I'd have it on 2 Drobos. So I'd have like 4 copies of it within 24 hours of the shoot. So that was a nice feeling that it was backed up. But I still didn't have a good solution for what to do about like an offsite, or at least an offline backup. So I essentially got, for the 8-bay Drobo, I had in the case to the right in this slide was a duplicate set of drives. So I'm still back to the idea of, so this one only lived in my basement. It didn't live over offsite technically, but it lived on a high shelf in a waterproof case in my basement. Which would never flood because it's actually at grade. But so every 3 months or so, I would physically swap the hard drives. So there's 8 hard drives in this case. I would physically remove them from the big Drobo and put these guys in, and then ask ChronoSync to sync everything from the small Drobo. And that worked well. It just, again, it wasn't automated in terms of having another solution, and I still didn't have anything offsite. And then I started to run into some big issues with the Drobo that said the small Drobos. One of them completely died, and I just got a different one, the next most available one I got, and implemented that, and it was working fine. But they definitely had some weird issues where they wouldn't mount, because again, they're direct attached, and so I was really starting to have a problem and starting to get a little panicked. And this was just over a year ago. And so I was using this system up until then. And so I really started to panic. I'm not sure what's going on. And probably a year before that, I did buy a Synology because I thought, let me learn about this thing, because I heard, I think Andy Anatko on MacBook Weekly had mentioned that he used one. I'm like, I didn't know anything about it. Let me get one of those things and see what that's about. I'll tell you more in detail about it. But so I just barely scratched the surface of what to do with those things. But I started to look more intently at it. So Frederick and I were just talking before the show started. So this is the current page of Drobo. So as of January 27th, Drobo support products no longer available. So this was sort of coming even a year ago. People were online were saying that they thought they had gone out of business essentially in terms of support and things like that. So now it seems to be official and as of not that long ago. So I'm glad I had figured something else out. Because I never thought their support was very good to begin with, at least not in my experience. And they didn't seem to provide much hardware support in terms of parts and things like that, again, in my experience.
The support has been horrible. The support, it just went down into the drain, unfortunately. And I think if I'm the target market, of people that are still limping along with their Drobos and like, oh, it still works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is a big flare in the sky saying it's broke and you need to find safe harbor, right? So, because if the machine goes down, you got to hope to find one on eBay or something, or I don't know if you can scrape together some parts or who knows what. Right. So this is good. There's no more ambiguity. Drobo is officially dead. Right. So now go find someplace else for your bits. Right?
Yep. No, totally. Because now's the time. So they had some good stuff in the beginning and throughout their run, but I'm not sure what happened. Along the way. But who knows?
Yeah. Back to you.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So now I've switched over to using systems that are network attached storage. So NAS instead of direct attached, which DAS like the Drobo was, or the Drobos I used. So Synology is a company that's been around for a while, and they specialize in this sort of storage. And they make everything from a 2-bay box, which would essentially allow you to have 2 identical hard drives sitting in the box, and one would mirror the other. And that would be the simplest sort of backup that they would make in terms of backing up. I mean, in terms of allowing a drive to fail, and you still wouldn't lose any data. And those units are pretty inexpensive. They're, I think, in the $300 range. And then they have units all the way up to full rack-mounted, petabyte systems that are just crazy enterprise kind of stuff. So they run the full gamut of being able to provide a ton of different solutions, and there's a huge amount of specs to follow and try and get the right machine for what you're trying to do. But I'll just show you a little bit about what I got into. So this is the rack that I built that sits in my basement. And so first I have to give complete acknowledgement to a guy on YouTube named Will Yarborough, who runs a site there a channel there called Space Rex. And he is a total storage nerd and knows certainly way more than I do about the nuts and bolts of it. And he helped me a lot with putting the system together. I physically built the system. I knew enough about the strategy I wanted to deploy, but then he helped me just figure out the exact steps to take to do it. And I'll talk more about that. But so the black boxes at the lower half of the rack are 3 different Synology units. The top one is a 4-bay unit, so there's 4 hard drives in there. That is actually the offsite solution for a friend of mine. So he's got another Synology in his office, and I helped him with his just backing up all digital assets. And so those 2 machines sync together. The one below that is an 8-bay, and that's my primary Synology unit. So these work the same way that the Drobo does, in the sense that when you first populate it with hard drives, you have to select what type of storage pool, as they call it, that you want to have. And so it's basically a RAID 5, which means that one of the drives can fail and you won't lose any data. I use that they have their own proprietary system called Synology Hybrid RAID, which is also a little bit similar to Drobo in the theory that you could mix drives of different sizes if you needed to. So even if you bought an 8-bay unit, you could start with as few as 2 drives of that. They have to be the same size, or at least it'll work based on the size of the smallest one. And then you can add drives. So the SHR, the Synology Hybrid RAID, allows you to expand versus, to my understanding, that RAID 5, you would have to set up, you'd have to populate it with 8 drives of equal size and call it RAID 5, and that's it. Versus the SHR, if you populated it with all, say, 10 terabyte drives, and then you're like, well, I need more storage, you could slowly start replacing one at a time with larger drives, and the system would just adapt and rebuild itself as you would do one by one replacing drives. So a very similar kind of system in that regard. But again, this is network attached, so that gives you a huge amount of opportunities. And so I'll come back to this photo at the end, and we can talk a little bit more about it. But what I want to talk about here, this is my whole strategy, right? So I'm going to walk through some slides. This page is going to fill up with some more components and things. So when I come, well, I'll start with the Mac Studio. So the Mac Studio is my computer in my office. And external to that, because everything's external in Mac Studio, I have a box that holds a RAID card. So it basically has 4 NVMe, those are the M.2 drives that are basically SSD storage, and those are RAIDed together. So this is a similar kind of RAID where you're taking advantage of putting 4 hard drives together to expand the capacity. But this is not in a RAID 5. This is, I believe it's a RAID 0, RAID 1, where they're striped together. So it basically gives you additional storage. So it's 4 times 2 in my case. So it's 8 terabytes of space, but they're striped together. So the RAID writes across every drive and reads across every drive simultaneously. And so it gives you incredible speed. So this little black box yields 6 gigabytes per second of throughput to the Mac Studio. So I don't do a lot of video editing, but when I do, it's crazy fast, and it's plenty fast for photo editing. So it's quite good for that. So the Mac Studio and the little SSD RAID, I show a picture here of one that's actually by OWC, which I provide a link to, because the other one, Sonnet, is good, but I think it's just a more expensive one. So basically, that's the setup in the office. So when I come back from a shoot, I shoot to my laptop. I shoot tethered to Capture One all the time. So we have a Capture One session, which is just a nice single folder that contains all the raw files in a nice organized way. So basically, I copy the session from the MacBook Pro, and it copies over to the SSD, and then I could immediately start working on it on the Mac Pro. But then, in order to back it up, I then copy down to the Synology, the 8-bay one that's in the rack. And so again, they make different ones. They make rack mounted ones, the RS, and they make a DS for disk station, which is the one you saw at the bottom. It looks more like a desktop mounted one. So I use something here. Synology makes tons of apps, and the third parties make tons of apps for Synology machines. So they make something called Synology Drive, which is basically a synchronization utility. So I set it up that as soon as something hits that SSD RAID, it's immediately copied to the Synology. So it's not doing it like the Drobo was, like once overnight, for instance. And so as soon as I make one little change in Capture One, it's immediately copied to the Synology. And that may seem like a lot of overhead, but it's super, super fast, because everything, when I get some more pieces on the screen, everything that's connected to the Synologies and the computer all runs over a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. So most Ethernet connections are 1 gigabit, and that's not gigabyte. That's gigabit. So a 1 gigabit connection can yield about 125 megabytes per second, because there's 8 bits in a byte. So your cable company doesn't want you to think that, because they want you to think you're getting a gigabyte per second, but you're not. So 10 gigabit is a 1 gigabit connection, a gigabyte connection. So everything copies quite quickly over to the Synology, so it's backed up. And when I first learned about Drive, I was like a little apprehensive. I'm like, well, what if I make a mistake or I delete something I didn't want to delete? Because that's a two-way sync. So as soon as I would delete something from the Mac Studio, it would knock it off the Synology. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not good. I delete things incorrectly all the time. So I was worried about that. But they have you covered in two ways in that regard. So you basically have a trash folder, they call it recycle bin, on the Synology. So you can, even if you delete something in your preferences on the Synology, you say, well, don't empty the recycle bin for 30 days. I have mine set to. So you can easily go, but you can just navigate to it. It's not hidden somewhere. It's not in some proprietary format. It doesn't take time to find it. You just navigate to it, go to recycle bin, and then it has your entire folder tree there of anything that's been deleted, and you can just go grab it and move it back to the other folder. So it's super easy in that regard. And then they have this whole other system, which I won't be able to explain all the details of how it works, but it's called Synology snapshots. So you can basically revert your system to where it was yesterday or 2 days ago or a month ago, and you'll basically have everything as it was then. So if you did some serious damage, or maybe your entire system got cryptoed or something, you could actually just roll it back to a previous state. And I don't know how it does it in terms of why it doesn't use up a ton of storage, but it does allow you to do that. So there's the combination of the recycle bin and snapshots makes me feel like I'm not going to lose anything that I accidentally delete. So it pretty much takes care of the human error part of it, which is really what I was looking to do. I wanted all this to be fully automated and not have to think about, well, let me make sure I copy this over and let me go make sure I have 2 copies of that thing. So this, again, it's constantly syncing back and forth, and you can totally monitor it and see what it's up to. So that's the primary backup solution. So on the SSD RAID, if you go back to the top of the screen, projects live on there for about 6 months, maybe, before I have to delete them. So the SSD RAID is a little bit of a revolving door. And so I'll take stuff off of there. But then it all still lives on the Synology. But that's only one copy, essentially. After 6 months or so, that's just one copy. So what I did, I had this machine previously, before I got the rack station model. So, and just a quick aside, so Synology's nomenclatures is kind of, once you understand it, it makes sense. So RS-1221 Plus means that unit can eventually hold 12 drives, even though it's built for 4, but you can add a 4-bay expansion unit. And then the 21 is the year that it came out. So it's a unit that can hold 12 drives, made in 2021. The one below it is a disk station that natively comes with 8 drives, but you can add 2 5-bay expansion units to it. They're cabled; they just attach with a cable to it. And that unit came out in 2017. And the Plus is, I recommend only the Plus units. Some of the other ones are cheaper that don't say Plus, but Plus pretty much gets you something that Synology calls BTRFS, which is just their very robust file system that allows the snapshots to take place and some other really good file management stuff to take place. So using another app that Synology makes called Hyper Backup, the 1221 backs up to the 1817, then that's a once a day process. So you could set it to whatever you want. You could do it once a week or whatever. And so I think of that like if something more major goes wrong, at least I have some time before something bad hits the other backup. And I thought about even making it less often, just to maybe more thoroughly do that. And I think I have to check on it. I think I could actually leave it off and it would just do a wake on LAN, which means it would wake up when it's pinged. So it would sort of go into a sleep mode, which might even be a little more safe for it if anything were to go wrong. So in my house, this is the setup. So I have 2 Synologies that duplicate each other pretty much, and everything I do as I'm doing it is copied to the rack-mounted one. But I also have.
And Jeffrey, I was going to ask you before you continue: is the setup completely wireless, or like the first mile from the MacBook Pro, and that's your Ethernet cabled into that?
Yeah, everything here is wired, and everything I've shown you so far is all 10 gigabit. So if I go back to the rack photo, I'll show you what that means a little bit. So if you want to do 10 gigabit connection, you do need a special Ethernet switch, and you need Synology units that will support 10 gigabit. The Mac Studio natively supports 10 gigabit, which is great. So you don't need any kind of adapter. And the Synology, some of them support it natively, but the ones I have, and you're going to see one more in a second, all needed an additional accessory card. So the Synology is very much a computer. It's not just a box that holds disks. So it's very much a computer. You can add RAM to it. You can add various accessory cards. And so one of the accessory cards they make is a 10 gigabit connection.
Okay.
So, and even the MacBook Pro, I just recently started doing that as a wired connection right into the system. It actually, for simplicity, I have it going into the SSD RAID because that's pretty much where it goes, but it actually copies first to the Synology in the middle and copies back up to the SSD. That's just a little detail that doesn't really matter too much. That's just the physical workflow. Like when I walk in my house, I can plug it into my basement right into a Ethernet port, and it just copies over.
Yep. Cool.
So this is everything in my house, but I have an associate photographer, and my studio manager Brian has been working with me for a few years, and so he lives across town. And we started working together before the pandemic, but we'd already started working as a work from home kind of a thing, because I work out of my house, he works out of his house, so we were all set up for that. But so I was excited about getting to know the Synology better, because I knew we could really exploit some of the benefits that it has here. So basically, there's another Synology unit that lives in Brian's house, and over the internet, our two Synologies sync together through the same Synology Drive application. And it's also instantaneous. So, in fact, just today I had another call with my consultant, Will, from SpaceX, and because I was having a speed problem, and he immediately fixed it. So now it's like, I just did a test a few hours ago. So if I generate a 700 megabyte TIFF from my Phase 1 camera, it's on Brian's unit in less than a minute. So in other words, it copies from my Mac Studio to my Synology to Brian's Synology over the internet in less than a minute.
That's crazy.
So,
and how much data was that again?
Like around 700 megabytes is like one TIFF file.
Okay. Yeah.
16-bit TIFF. Yeah, and it's constantly saying, I use Capture One, and if you ever burrowed into all the folders in Capture One, there's all these little tiny setting files, and those are constantly syncing. So if you just make one point of an adjustment in color temperature, it's sending files across because it made a change.
Do you find that you're able to, or is this in your workflow that you're both operating in Capture One simultaneously, and it's respecting those changes because it's fast enough, or do you run the risk of corrupting something?
You would run. We haven't put that to an extreme test, but it is. But the best workflow would be to not be working on the same Capture One session. We can both be in Capture One, but we should be in different sessions. So if I ask Brian to work on a particular job, I'll sort of check in with him if I want to go poking around in there. Like, are you out of it, or where are you at with it?
And there's no built-in like UI flags or anything, like a padlock that appears on a session if you've got it open, and vice versa. Kind of like what DaVinci Resolve is doing.
Oh, I wasn't familiar with that. That would be a good idea, but I imagine that would be some coordination between Capture One and perhaps Synology or whatever, just to know which session you're in. That's interesting. Yes, that might be sort of the only manual process that we have to go through. Is like, I know, for instance, Brian, hey, work on the retouching on this job, and I just know to stay out of that folder.
Okay, cool.
Synology will. Yeah,
I was just going to say, at a certain point, I guess, I'm thinking from a computer standpoint and technology, but at a certain point, you got to leave something for humans to do, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, have some role here.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
But it will come up, because I see them come up every now and then. It will throw in a file. If it's not sure what to do, in a sense, it will make a duplicate file and call it constant. So if it sees something that doesn't look right, it'll try and resolve it for you.
Okay. It'll make what does it name that duplicate file? Because you broke up a little bit when you were saying what it calls it.
It calls it conflict. So
conflict.
It'll add to the file, and you'll just see it here. Okay. So that does happen sometimes. But we just try and stay out of each other's way, and that's so then further up the tree here in Brian's house. So he has the Synology, but then he has the same kind of. So he works primarily off the laptop with an external monitor. That's his prime computer, and then attached to that is this is where we use the OWC version of this RAID box, and so his and so I'm only showing it flowing through the computer. It's actually flowing more or less directly to the RAID, but it has to obviously go through the computer because that's how it's connected. So this is sort of the end of the trail here. So with these 3 Synology units, I have basically once everything's off the RAIDs, like say a year from now, we have 3 copies of everything, 2 in my house, 1 in Brian's house. So we do have an offsite solution. I don't have a solution where there might be a different kind of media because I'm not sure what kind of different media you would use these days. So I still deliver all my final photos through Dropbox. So that is what I'm considering my 4th backup, and that is it's only the finished photos, and that I'm considering just another sort of sandbox thing on its own because it's not part of this system. So if something terrible were to happen, whatever's on Dropbox would be safe.
Oh, interesting. Are you also using Dropbox for client delivery at any point, or is this completely behind the scenes?
No, the Dropbox is for client delivery. That's kind of the only reason we use it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and you can set these units up to be your own sort of cloud. And I've tested a little bit. I've just sent a few files here and there to people to say how quickly does this download. And I may not have had it set up correctly, but it didn't download as quickly as I thought it should. And also, I don't want to be like, this all runs in my house. My house has a generator, but, those don't always come on. So I'm just thinking of like, I'm away for a week. The power goes out, the generator doesn't come on, and clients can't get files, right? That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So I'd just rather and Dropbox is super quick on my phone to like somebody emails and says, "Oh, can you resend those files?" It's that's 10 seconds. Yeah, Dropbox
like
search.
That's the right tool. That absolutely feels like the right tool for that, and it's off of your premises. And if something, God forbid, should happen to your house or you don't want that infrastructure to be impacted. People can still access it, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to continue to use Dropbox for that. And again, it's just the final files. I don't upload anything else. And for a while, like before I got into this whole system, when I was using the Drobos for an offsite, I was trying through Backblaze and I forget some of the other ones. These offsite storage cloud backup services. I never got anywhere with any of them. I tried like 3 of them. I never got anywhere. Because I have a lot of data, but still I was trying to upload, small parts of it, and their utilities would completely bog down the computer. Like the computers would be useless. I just never had any luck. And there was some system, what was the service that went out of business like 5 years ago? And they told everyone, quick, download your data before we turn the servers off.
Oh, there's been so many. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. So, I don't remember. Yeah, there's been a couple though.
Yeah, so that's like a thing. It could happen.
Yeah,
hopefully Synology doesn't go the way of Drobo, but they're a much bigger company. They make way more products. They support them very well, and there's an enormous community out there of people who can help support. So I'm going to give another plug to Will Yarborough at SpaceX. So he has an interesting story because he had some other job and he was just making YouTube videos about this stuff out of his own personal interest. And as he started to gain some traction, and it dawned on him that, he and his wife could just end up just running this consulting business that they do now. They'd make YouTube videos and you can hire Will to help you sort out all the details. So I was interested in learning how to do it. So I might have gone a little further than most people would in terms of actually trying to physically set it up and build the system. But he's available to help either strategize or give you nuts and bolts. So I've hired him by the hour like 3 or 4 times just to come through. And so you just remotely connect and he can dig into the Synologies because they're super robust. There's millions of settings, but also really straightforward if you want to just get started with it.
Make sure you link us to him as well. That would be great because that's a magic bit right there. I'd be willing to pay for that if I'm trying to get my I hit a brick wall and I can't understand how to get X to be Y or vice versa. Just to have someone be able to remote into it and make it all okay would be perfect.
Exactly. No, he's super good, and I know he does. He will for like money. He will manage your units all day long. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you can pay him some money per month, and then he'll completely manage the system remotely and just make sure everything's working. You don't have to, once it's set up, to touch anything. Or you can be like me, where like I know enough to to get some things done, but probably not enough where I might start making mistakes. And that's where I call them. Like I had to do like a port forwarding thing on my UDM Pro, the router, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that. And I'm like, that's worth some money to pay Will and let him figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to get in that situation where you finally call Will, but it's too late, and he's like, you know, if you hadn't clicked that button right there, I would have been able to do something, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. Let me show one last slide here. So back to the rack, and I don't think I can point to anything here, right? Maybe I can.
Oh yeah, you can.
I can. Okay. So if you can see my mouse, the little white sort of half rack unit thing here, this is the 10 gigabit switch, right? So it's connected back to, there's a whole other rabbit hole you can get into. So the silver components are made by a company called Unify. You don't need these. I just went a little off the deep end. This is something called the UDM Pro, which is basically a super fancy router and has one hard drive because you can connect our cameras to it. So it's sort of like it can do the video recording, but it's a crazy fancy router. And then one of their switches here. But they also make this switch. So the reason I got into all this is because I said, hey, Will, what's a good 10 gigabit switch? And he sent me a link to this one little box. And then before I knew it, I had all these other boxes.
Yeah, right.
So, but basically, just for anyone who doesn't know, so most most computers these days would connect over a 1 gigabit connection over Ethernet, and that's pretty standard these days. And most of the ports in these units are all in fact 1 gigabit connections. So if you want a faster connection, you have to connect this switch to your router, which is what this one cable is doing. And then once that's connected, then everything that flows into the switch can talk to each other over 10 gigabit. Right. So this switch doesn't make everything 10 gigabit. It only makes the 4 ports that are attached to it. Those 4 ports can talk to each other. So those 4 ports are my 2 Synologies, my Mac Studio, and then also my laptop, in the sense that when I can plug it in the basement to a 10 gigabit adapter so that my laptop can then talk to the whole system at 10 gigabit. So when I come back from a shoot, I plug it in there and I copy the latest shoot over to the system. So everything that's in the next 10 gigabit.
So blazingly fast speeds, right? So to copy, like you were saying, that 17, what was it, gigabyte file? Or if you to move that
700 megabyte.
Or 700 megabytes. Yeah, to copy that over. Do you need that? Because what you've built here feels like it could serve a small to medium sized business, right?
Yeah.
Do you need all that?
No, so that's how I wanted to wrap up the presentation, is to say that you can, you could also do very robust like video editing with this too, for the speeds that it can do. Yeah. I wanted the fast connection because I am dealing with larger files, and when I get like a shoot, because I shoot with a phase 1 150 megapixel digital back, and so one shoot could be 60 gigabytes or more, and so just a copy over would take a long time if it were over 1 gigabit. Just keep in mind, the 1 gigabit again is about 125 megabytes per second, which is okay, but not that fast. Right. 10 gigabit is 10 times that. So that's up to a gigabyte per second. So it's worth. I mean, if it was a factor of 2, maybe it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's a factor of 10. So
absolutely.
It's not that hard to set up. The switch is like $300. The cards that go in the Synology might be $100 or so each, something like that. But you're getting way faster speeds. So, but again, to answer your question a little bit, so you could go. I should have had a slide here, but I provided a link that Frederick will post up for you, and it's actually a pre-filtered link on Synology's website, which is filtered for units that support the BTRFS, which is the one that allows you to do the snapshots, which I think is very important. And also filtered for, I guess, Synology Hybrid RAID and one other thing. But so they make like 2 bay units, right? So let's say you're just getting started, but you want to start off the right way with some kind of nice storage solution. You could get a 2 bay unit, which again would just mirror. So if you had a 16 terabyte drive, you need 2 16 terabyte drives, and they would just be a copy of one another. And then let's say you wanted to have the offsite solution, right? So you could get another one and you could hook it up, go to your mom's house, right, or your friend's house, and just plug it in there to their router, into the switch that comes, it's part of most routers. You plug it in there, and they talk to each other. It's pretty easy to set up over Synology's Quick Connect protocol. And so right then, you instantly have two copies, and one of them's offsite. And that would be less than $1,000 probably by the time you depending on what size drives you want to put in it. So that could be
and nothing per month, right? Versus the cloud backup system.
That's a huge point. That's each point, yeah. And then the nice thing about, again, with the BTRFS and the way the Synology hybrid RAID and everything, let's say you now want to expand to a bigger unit, you can migrate the drives. So you would take those two drives out of the 2-bay unit, and you could buy a 5-bay or an 8-bay unit and put them in there. You have to double check the specs, which ones work with which, but pretty much you can do it with most of them. And then it'll recognize it very quickly, and then you could add some more drives, and then you're off to the races. You can just keep adding stuff. So it's very expandable. And so I like any company that lets you just get in at the sort of ground floor with a reasonably priced system, and then you can expand. So it's so I definitely recommend this idea. There's another company out there called QNAP, which I've never really used, but Synology's operating system seems to get the best reviews. It's pretty robust. They maintain it really well. It's very secure. I think they had one hacking issue a number of years ago, but they haven't had any problems like that since.
Now, so, with the setup that you have dialed in here, which is beautiful, by the way, and also kudos on the product photography here, with the blue lighting and all that. I love it. It's very cool. Right. You got to do it, right? But with all this, even with the offsite backup and at the friend's house and all this working together, do you not feel the need at all for a third party cloud backup solution, like a Backblaze, somebody plugged in just to give you that third layer if scorched earth, my data's still there solution? Yeah,
I mean, in the current, like I said, use Dropbox, but those are only the final photos.
Yeah, that's for the final though. Yeah, it's the final. Yeah. But I'm talking like a mirror of R2D2 you have here. Could you have that in the cloud?
I think I just have run into the problem where it's just I don't have can't physically get all the data over there. It just takes too long, and I haven't because I've got on this system I think I've got over 60 terabytes.
Yeah, so, that would take data. That would take time to move up there, but I love this solution. I'm just saying, if you needed the cloud component to it, like a Backblaze. I talked to them at one of these last trade shows, and the salesperson was telling me for large amounts of data for those customers, they don't expect everyone to be able to fit all their data through a straw. So they have this service where they will either send you drives or you can send them drives, and they will sideload your backup solution, and then you just connect it to your account, and then it's incremental after that. So.
Great. Yeah, that would be definitely a good way to do it. Yeah, I think if you're just getting started in your business and you're looking, so I would say if you can implement something like this, the network attached storage, and then plus what Frederick talking about, you would sleep very soundly at night.
You're done.
Because everything would be taken care of. And I didn't talk too much about the other advantage of this. Like you can log into it from anywhere, right? I can connect to any of these machines and poke around and download files right from it, depending on whatever connection I'm on where I am. But so it's,
and if you do that, what's that workflow? So if you're in a hotel room, like what's your level of access to the data? Can you boot up in DaVinci Resolve or Capture One and get to work there? I know you're going to be dependent on whatever the local internet connection is, but could you theoretically just operate on a remote location just like you were sitting in your living room?
Well, the only thing I've tried so far is just downloading like individual files and then doing something with them in Photoshop, and then they would be downloaded to the local thing. You couldn't really work like you could work directly off of it when you're on your local network, but working off of it remotely, certainly over probably a slow connection and probably over Wi-Fi, I don't think it would work very well. I think you could probably try to, but I don't know that it would work. But in terms of having access to some somebody says, can you fix something on that file? I could easily have access to it and then work on it and then upload it back to the Synology and deliver it to the client if needed. So Yeah, and right now Brian's the way it's set it up without going into too much detail. So he does when he's working on my photos versus ones that he takes. He actually works directly off the Synology, and he does say it's a little bit slow. But like I found once Capture One sort of fully previews everything, then it usually works a little bit better. Okay. But Synology just added a new thing to the their drive application, so you have to set up this sync task, but you can basically let in your Mac, it works on PC too, but I only use Macs. In your Mac Finder sidebar, you basically would have a folder, whichever folder you target on the Synology, and it would just sit there. You click on it, and you'd see everything that's in the folder would have a little cloud symbol next to it. And as soon as you do like a right click on that folder and say download, and it physically moves the data from the Synology locally to your Mac. It can't do it on any external device to your Mac. It has to be on the hard drive in the Mac. But it would move it right to the Mac, and then you could start working on it. But it's still in the background as part of the Synology, and it continues to sync. So
okay. Like, is that a move? Copy. Is it a move or is it a copy? Is it like
It's a copy. It's not moving it off of the Synology, but it's making a.
It's a connected copy though,
copy.
Right? It's a connected.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I've never seen that before.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a new feature, and it's still a little buggy. We've had it's a little fits and starts. We've only been working with it for the last few weeks, but I'm sure it'll get better. Some of it has to do with the Mac OS, I'm sure, in terms of how smoothly it works. But it's a nice idea. So you can easily, so if you were working on something like a larger video file or something, it would take a few minutes to download it to your Mac hard drive, but then you would work on it as if it's natively there, because it is natively there, but it's just still, like you said, connected back.
Right.
So
really cool.
I'll just still managing the sync on it. Yeah. And then when you're done with it, you can just undo download, and then it would just disappear.
Then it's done. And, okay. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Cool. So here's if you're complete with your slides, I have the $1 million question for you at the end. So are you ready for it?
Uh-huh.
So, what's the cost of this? So I want to know what the enclosures, what sans the drives in them, just the empty enclosures. What does that run? And then what is that with the drives, and what capacity? I know you may have said it, but what's your max capacity on R2D2 here?
Right now that they're populated for, they each have 16 terabyte drives in them. So that's 8 times 16 terabytes. Yeah. But you lose one chunk of 16 terabyte to the parity, right? So 7 times 16. So it's roughly like 100 terabytes. And I'm just looking up the cost of these things here. So my 8-bay unit there, the 1221 Plus, sells for $1,300, and with those drives, and then you could put whatever drives you think you want to use in there, but 16 terabyte ones are not cheap, but I built them up slowly. Like I didn't just buy 24 16 terabyte drives at one time. But I had one unit, then I had another unit, then I had another unit, and a lot of them started out with smaller hard drives. And I like the Seagate Iron Wolves, and let's see what those are running these days from B&H. So like a 16 terabyte from Seagate Iron Wolf, which is a NAS rated hard drive, which is what you want, because these things are constantly spinning. So you do want ones that are rated. And so Western Digital, I think they have a color code system. They got into trouble because their reds were meant to be NAS rated, but I think someone discovered that they weren't, or they were rebranded something else drives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But don't quote me on that, but there was something sketchy with that.
Yeah.
So like a 6 terabyte Iron Wolf NAS drive is right now $250 from B&H. So, but if you want, again, I'm thinking more of the person who maybe is just getting started, starting to trip over their hard drives falling off their desk, and like, I need a better solution for this. You could probably start with 2 16 terabyte drives in a bay enclosure and be covered for a while. 16 terabytes is data. So yeah, for not huge money. So like, let me look at one of these. Because
while you're looking that up, like one of my questions is like to the some of the people that are watching this, I know who you are. There's some people that are watching this that are saying, you know what, I could just go buy 2 terabyte drives off of out of Best Buy and keep swapping those out and copy this and all that. Why do I need R2D2 to solve which is a smaller data problem? I don't know. What would you say to that person that's fighting with that?
I think if you're in the business of creating data, your small data problem is going to get to a big data problem. Unless you don't care about keeping it, it does just keep growing. And then, that stuff I've been accessing a long time, but I do have it. I mean, I did just search for a job that was 20 years old, and I was able to find it quite easily. So you never know what you're gonna. And I do sell images as stock. I don't sell generic stock, but I sell stock. Someone's coming around looking at a contractor, somebody who's working on a project, might be a lighting manufacturer or something. So it definitely is beneficial to me to keep everything accessible, because we do just generate income off of stock sales. So part of it's certainly offset by that. So so again, I don't want to intimidate people, say this is too fancy, because there are 2 different plus units that Synology makes. One's $300 and one's $450 that are 2-bay enclosures. And so one's expandable, one's not. So you could actually expand. You could buy a 2-bay and get an expansion unit, and then you have a 7-bay unit. Oh, okay. So the expansion units are nice, but they have to be on a separate volume. So it might be weird to have like one volume that's on the 2-bay and another volume that's on the 5-bay. So it might just be better just to move up to a different machine if you fill that up. But there are also 20 terabyte drives available these days. So
are there
20 terabytes?
We're up to 20 terabyte single drive? Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah. So you'd be quite happy with a 2-bay, and then and much more affordably be able to get a second 2-bay as an offsite. Yeah, and
if you're okay with if you're okay with all my eggs in one basket scenario, right? Because 2 drives, there's a lot of data to go away.
Yeah, well, that's where the they would be mirrored. So they'd be mirrored. So that's how Synology would set that up. But there's all kinds of things you can do with Synology. I mean, this is just barely scratching the surface. There's tons of apps. You can run surveillance cameras off of them. You can run Plex servers if you do your media server off of it. You can do all kinds of stuff. So wow. Definitely cool. So I thought it'd just be helpful to show, because I went through a lot of iterations of this kind of stuff over the years, and I finally feel like this one's working well. And if you do work with a partner of some kind, or maybe even fortunate enough to maybe you live up north in the summer and down south in the winter, you could have all your data in both places that you live at all times.
Yeah, so you could. What a dream! Yeah, what a dream in this day and age, right? Or if like you're fortunate enough to be bi-coastal or have multiple residences or whatever, maybe you just go over, and spend time with the family for 3 months out of the year, and you have your data, everything that you need in order to be productive. That's great. That's the holy grail. So when we need to do another one of these with a slightly less ambitious version of R2D2, because this is like, I look at this, I mean, regardless of the price, but I look at this, it looks simple, because I've seen wildly complex versions of this. This is elegant. I can see this in my house or my garage or in my closet or whatever. It doesn't look intimidating, but I was wondering, like, there's a lot of headroom here for the average photographer that's shooting, maybe even someone that's shooting weddings or something. That's doing that level of work. I don't know. Maybe I don't shoot weddings, so I don't know. Maybe this is the dream configuration for wedding photographers, especially the remote connectivity part of it for third parties that need to access into the data. Yeah. So as I think through it, I'm convincing myself that that's a great. I should use that solution. Yeah. And the more I think about it, like I think for a lot of people, the 2-bay box would go a long way with 20 terabytes in one box. Right. Yeah. I didn't realize drives were at 20 terabytes. I remember when they were 1. I'm dating myself, but I'm like 1, and then the 2s came out. Right. And you're like 2 terabytes in one drive. That's ridiculous, and then on up from there to 20 terabytes. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're going to pay for that 20 terabytes, but it's still 20 terabytes.
Yeah, it might be $400 or $500. I don't even know what they are, but I haven't gotten one yet. I'm sticking with the 16s for now because that's what's in everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's worth exploring. If anybody wants to get in touch with me about it or learn from Will on his YouTube channel, he's got loads of videos. He can walk you right through the whole setup, which a lot of it's just one time that you can, once you have it set up. It's not hard to set up. It gets a little more complex if you really want to exploit all the best features and do a multi-box setup with syncing back and forth. It's not that hard, but you just want to make sure you're using the right strategy.
Absolutely.
Which primary, which one's copying over, which folders are targeted, anything like that. So
very good.
So cool. Yeah, well, thanks,
Jeffrey,
for that, Frederick.
Thank you for putting that together. That was fantastic and very helpful and 100% timely. Considering, like I said, I'm limping along on impulse drive now, so I gotta figure out my situation. So this is perfect. So clearly, Synology looks like a great way to go. So I was looking at, of course, Synology was on the list, and then OWC was on the list, and one other, I forget. I think you mentioned the other one, but there were 3 storage providers on the list. QNAP. Thank you. Yeah. So I've heard from more than one photographer that has decided on Synology as the sort of the baseline. This is where my data is going to live for the foreseeable future solution. So you just kind of put another nail in that wall. So that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, it's good. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. And I've been running this system for about a year, so it's pretty much flawless. We haven't had any snafus, really, not going with. We've had a couple slow down things, but we'll fix that this morning. There was just some port setting that wasn't right. So far so good.
And you have it plugged into a UPS, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, it does plug into. I'm not showing the bottom of the rack here, just because. I have a Cyber Power UPS that can easily power that, and then the house is on a generator. So the which I got because I run my office out of here, and there was 5 days a couple years ago where we were out without power, and that was hard. And we don't have cell phone coverage. We don't have power either, so that's bad. So so the UPS works. Only has to be on for about 2 minutes before the generator kicks on, but it's still good to have that. And the Synologies are smart, so they connect. You connect one of them to the UPS with the USB cable, and then that becomes the UPS server, and then the other units can talk. So when that one knows that the UPS went on, it tells the other ones that the UPS went on, and then they all can implement their shutdown after a 5-minute protocol or whatever you have it set to.
Oh, so see, that's another, I learn something new every day, because I'm thinking archaic UPS systems that when they detect a power outage, they instantly click on, and whatever's connected to them, it doesn't know, right? It's just that it just stays on for an additional amount of time, and hopefully you have time to go shut your computers and everything down safely. Yeah. So it gives you that buffer time. I had no idea that there was a data connection that would, from the UPS, tell I didn't know that. It'll tell the Synology to, hey, power's gone, initiate protocol Z, right? And shut the whole thing down.
Well, you can do it with your Mac too. If you want, most of the APC UPSs, they'll have a data cable, just a USB cable. You plug it into your Mac, and you go to the power settings and the preferences, and there's a UPS tab there, and it'll recognize that UPS is connected, and then you can tell it, like, well, if we're out of power for more than 5 minutes, shut it down.
How did I not know this?
The next level. Yeah, it's so cool. But
I did not know this.
It can use Hive Mind to say, all right, all your other Synologies, all right, we're going to shut down together. All right, 1, 2, 3, go to sleep.
Wow. Yeah, see, this is me coming from the refugee world of Drobo. Drobo had nothing like that, that was that smart.
Yeah. No, the Drobo was out in the wind. Yeah, the Drobo was in the wind as far as I knew, like if the power went out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, what would happen with Drobos is I'm going to say millions of people, whoever's listening to this that has a Drobo is going to raise their hand when I say this. If you've been in this situation with power fluctuations, especially at the beginning of the Drobo journey, notorious for frying your power supply, so which would mean it would kind of work. So lights would come on the Drobo and make you think that it was getting power, but it wasn't getting enough power. So you just thought your drive pack was fried at that point, right? So there's no kind of intelligence to tell you or to intelligently shut down or even message you. It would email you if things came up, as you know, but not like that. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. So that's definitely a question about the UPS. Yeah, that's just the bottom of the rack because it weighs so much. Yeah.
All right. Well, if people want to check out your work, aside from your amazing infrastructure IT setup in the basement there, if they want to see your photography work and all that, what's a good location for them to go to?
Sure. My newly updated website, jeffreytotaro.com, and I'm at Jeffrey Totaro on Instagram. And yeah, so we just updated the website with a bunch of new photos a few weeks ago. So it's got some fresh content on there finally.
Very cool. So, all right, my friend. Thank you for doing this. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I think that'll be helpful to a lot of people out there. Will get something out of that, myself included. So thank you. Thanks again for doing that.
Good. I hope it's helpful. Yep. Okay. Pleasure.
All right. Take care, Jeffrey.
This is TWiP.